California gun rights lawyer Chuck Michel and his battles with Kamala Harris over the past 20 years. That and more on this episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast.
No, the devil's got no hold on me.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Mikotowski. I'm also a CNN contributor and the founder of thereload.com, where you can head over and sign up for our free newsletter today if you want to keep up to date with what's going on with guns in America. This week, we are discussing a story that we broke dealing with the presidential election and one of the candidates, specifically Vice President Kamala Harris, and her background as San Francisco DA, where she once supported a total ban on handgun possession within or by city residents. And to discuss that, I've got somebody who was intimately involved in that situation, Chuck Michel, who's the president of the California Rifle and Pistol Association, and also was the lawyer on the challenge to that law, and who has, I think it's fair to say, gone up against Kamala Harris a number of times throughout his career out there in California. So welcome to the show, Chuck. Thank you for coming back on.
Thanks for having me and getting the word out. Yeah,
and can you just tell people a little bit more about yourself and CRPA and some of the other groups that you're associated with?
Sure. CRPA is about a 150-year-old civil rights organization that does all litigates the Second Amendment issues and has been for many, many years. Also has all the programs that you'd associate with a state, marksmanship group, the juniors programs, the hunting, the conservation programs, basically everything that you would expect from an advocacy group. It's not just political; it's also supporting all the recreational and activities that shooters enjoy participating in. Then I'm also the CEO of Michel and Associates, which is one of the biggest law firms in the country that practices Second Amendment law. We've been doing that for about 30 years. Had many of the leading gun rights associations as clients over that time. And then I'm also the president of the Second Amendment Law Center, which is something that was created by me and a number of other leading Second Amendment attorneys across the country after Bruin came down, because there's so much litigation going on across the country on a variety of different issues, Second Amendment issues, that there was a need to coordinate friend of the court briefs, amicus briefs, so that the courts could get that backup material that a lot of times the parties didn't have the room or the time to put into their briefs. So that Second Amendment Law Center is a collection of some of the biggest minds in the Second Amendment legal community, and we're pretty much involved in all the cases across the country, trying to support the people who are fighting for your Second Amendment rights.
And key to our conversation today, you've been working specifically in California on Second Amendment issues, filing gun rights lawsuits there for several decades now, including the entire length of Kamala Harris's political career, right?
Right. And when we started, we didn't have Heller. We didn't have a recognition by the courts that the Second Amendment protected a fundamental individual right. So we always had to rely on due process issues, because often these ordinances or state laws are almost impossible to understand. What is an assault weapon? They don't define that in a way anybody can easily understand. So people are accidentally violating the law, or police are accidentally arresting people for a gun that's not covered by the law.
And speaking of that time period, the pre-Bruin, pre-Heller time period, that's what we're looking at with this, our main first topic here for the show. This city or measure, I guess, is a ballot measure. It wasn't passed by the Board of Supervisors. It was supported by 4 of them, which is what you need. By the way, do you know how many supervisors are on the board?
I think there's 9, if I remember correctly.
Okay. So it just didn't even have a majority of the board supporting it.
No, you needed 4 people just to put it on the ballot. You needed 4 votes to get it on the ballot. They didn't have the votes to pass it by the county Board of Supervisors. They had enough to get it on the ballot, though, so people could vote on it. But this was part of the preemption doctrine, which was the other big legal argument that we used to be able to use to oppose gun control efforts, either at the local level in particular. And so San Francisco tried twice to ban handguns. Once Dianne Feinstein led the effort. And
well, we'll get into that for sure. I want to talk about the whole history here, but first I want to just go over what exactly was that issue. And this was called Proposition H. It was 2005. It got the 4 votes, signatures necessary for it to be put on the ballot as a ballot measure, not as something the board would pass. It seemed to have very little support beyond those 4 supervisors. Harris seems to be the only named person who was in city government at the time that actually backed this alongside those supervisors. But at least according to the San Jose Mercury news at the time. But this measure was a total ban on handgun possession, not just a ban on future sales or something of that nature. It banned possession. It also banned all gun sales.
Guns and ammunition sales in the city.
Right. So
even between private parties.
Right. This is I think this is especially relevant because this is the most extreme measure that Harris has ever supported, as far as we know. And it has this. I mean, this is a total ban on ownership of handguns by anyone who was a San Francisco resident. They did have exceptions for people who were active duty police, military, or security guards. But that's it. Everyone else would have had to turn in their guns within 90 days, right, was the deadline set in this proposition of its enactment. And then they were supposed to set up, in consultation with actually the district attorney's office, so Kamala Harris would have been involved in this, penalties for people who didn't turn in their guns.
Right.
But before we get further into it, do you know if that process ever occurred? There seems to be any information on that. I mean, you guys filed suit before this went into effect. So
we stopped it before it took effect. So the infrastructure to enforce it wouldn't have been set up either by the DA or the San Francisco City Attorney's Office, because we stopped it before they were able to enforce it. But
okay. But first things first here, we have the San Jose Mercury News report that says Kamala Harris supported this bill alongside those 4 supervisors. And then you specifically remember her supporting this bill, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So
she's never met a gun control law she didn't like. San Francisco's tried all kinds of things, and she supported all of them as DA. And then as Attorney General, she was opposed to pretty much gun ownership in general. She was very active in opposing people getting concealed carry permits. So she's showed her true colors in California for years, for decades.
Right. But because this is something her campaign has not commented on. They did not reply to any of the questions that I asked, or apparently to other outlets who have also covered this subsequently, including, I think, the New York Post and the Daily Caller. So there have been a number of people who have asked them about this, and she has not responded to any of that. Maybe she will by the time this podcast goes up. I don't know. But for now, she isn't saying anything one way or the other. But it is clear, I think, that she did support this. Do you recall anything in particular that she did? I guess the only thing that I'm wondering is, like, how did she support it? This was 2005, to be fair. Like, we don't have we don't have a lot of documentation that's available on the internet generally that goes into her statements at the time on this. But do you recall in particular anything she said on it?
To be honest, I do not. I mean, I'm sure she did a press conference, probably mentioning this along with a number of other things. And I'm sure that on some of the materials that the supervisors, the campaigning to get Prop H passed, they mentioned that she supported it, in campaign flyers or whatever they distributed. But I do not, 20 years ago, I'm having a problem remembering what I had for breakfast yesterday these days. So I just don't remember the specifics of what statements she may have made. She
wasn't the one who defended it in court either. I guess that was the city attorney would have been that role. Okay, well, so let's talk about the court fight over this measure. So I think it's pretty clear that she supported it. Maybe she didn't have the biggest role in defending it or getting it passed. It did pass, by the way, 58% vote, which was significantly less than apparently the polling had indicated at the time. I think there was a poll that came out from reporting that I read that had it at 70+% support, passed by 58. Then you guys filed. So you filed suit, but this is kind of one of the reasons, I guess, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. It's interesting. One of the interesting things about Harris supporting this is that a lot of prominent gun control activists in California and in San Francisco didn't support this. In fact, it got a lot of opposition from even the police groups at the time. The police, one of the biggest police groups in San Francisco actively opposed the measure, told their members to vote against it, because I guess it didn't even accept retired police officers. Right? They would have also had to turn in their firearms.
And so the San Francisco Retired Police Officers Association was aggressively opposed to this. Interestingly enough, the San Francisco rank and file, like most police rank and file, they're not anti-gun, but the retired guys were definitely actively opposing this.
Mm-hmm. And then you also had Pink Pistols, which is a gay rights group that is also a gun rights group that was actively involved.
Yes, we've worked with them over the years, and they've been very active locally. At the time, what was going on was they didn't have the state legislature under control. It wasn't, a super majority back then. So you could actually stop stuff at the state level. So there was a big push to pass local ordinances by what was then the Legal Community Against Violence, is a gun control group headquartered in San Francisco that pushed, as part of their local initiatives, pushed local gun bans regulations. And they weren't really, they supported this, but they weren't really the ones behind it. I think they even recognized that it went a little too far, or way too far. But this was part of the local ordinance project that the NRA and the CRPA put together to oppose all these local efforts across the state. It's slowed down since then because the state legislature is now controlled by the Democratic machine. And so they can pretty much pass anything that they want to push through.
Because it was one of the interesting points there is that there wasn't a lot of support for this, even among staunch gun control advocates at the time, 2005, including Gavin Newsom, who was mayor of San Francisco, is now governor of California, of course, is advocating for a partial repeal of the Second Amendment. But at the time, he didn't think it would stand up in court. And the same thing was true for Dianne Feinstein, who was senator at the time. She didn't think it would stand up in court. And the reason they thought that is because this was not the first time that San Francisco tried to ban handgun ownership in particular, right? Dianne Feinstein herself was mayor in the 70s when the city passed a handgun ban at that time, right? And could you just give us a little bit of background on that, just to give people an understanding of why?
Yeah, I believe that was in response to the Harvey Milk shooting, where one of the city council members went in and murdered another city council member, and that was Feinstein's response. Now, Second Amendment Foundation, and I believe the NRA and I'm not sure about whether the CRPA was involved, but they all joined forces and filed a lawsuit against that, which was before my time. That was led by Don Cates, my friend and mentor, who has since passed on. But
they got that all the way up to the California State Supreme Court, right? That first case against the first handgun ban.
Yeah, and that was the Doe v. San Francisco ruling, which set the limits for preemption. So what is preemption, by the way? A local city cannot pass laws that conflict with or otherwise frustrate a state law, an intention of a state law. So that they're preempted by the state level regulation. So you can't pass a law that duplicates some state law because there's already a law in place, and you can't do one that makes something that the state makes illegal. You can't make it legal. And if it's state makes it legal, you can't make it illegal. So that was the major argument here, that there's this whole regulatory scheme at the state level for purchasing, acquiring, possessing handguns that the city of San Francisco's Prop H and the earlier Feinstein effort to ban handguns conflicted with. And so,
so the Second Amendment Foundation won that California State Supreme Court case back in I believe this is the 80s, against Feinstein's handgun ban. And so that is why it might seem odd that Harris would be the only one of these local, who many people know now as very staunch gun control advocates, to actually support this Proposition H attempt in 2005, because the rest of them thought this is just a repeat that isn't going to work. And I guess that's kind of foreshadowing, because then you guys came along and you filed your case. And what was your argument, and how did that case go?
That it was preempted, and that was the Fiscal case, and we won there on preemption grounds. And again, that was before we had Heller to confirm that the Second Amendment. It was way before it. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, the Prop H case was right before Heller happened.
Yes.
In fact, I think it was decided that the appeals case, I think, was finished in 2008, and then the California Supreme Court refused to hear their appeal.
Right. The California Supreme Court declined to take that case. So
and you guys actually got legal fees from San Francisco for this, right?
Yes, for prevailing.
Yeah,
and that was an NRA and CRPA case that Second Amendment Foundation also helped to bring, challenging Prop H. So thankfully we knocked that out, but that hasn't stopped San Francisco from trying everything around the edges that they can do to try and restrict gun ownership in that city, including banning gun stores, basically putting them out of business, banning self-defense ammunition, lock storage ordinances that make it impossible to access your firearm. That was pre-Heller, before we got
that was the next fight, right? So you guys won this Prop H fight that Harris supported, but maybe wasn't as intimately involved with defending or
right. But if I remember correctly, one of her deputy DAs was the guy who came up with this theory, this legal theory, to get around the Doe v. City of County San Francisco decision from earlier when they first tried this. So they were trying to be creative and come up with an argument that would get around that Doe ruling. And a lot of people didn't think it would fly, and it didn't. So Feinstein didn't jump on board. Newsom, probably because he was contemplating running for governor at the time and didn't want to alienate the rest of the state by advocating handgun bans. But a lot of people just saw this as a creative argument that was a little too clever for its own good, and that's what it turned out to be.
The legal difference was supposed to be, according to the supporters of Prop H, was supposed to be that it only applied to San Francisco residents, unlike the previous ban, and therefore it was home rule doctrine, and the courts just rejected that, essentially. Okay, and so you won that case, but obviously Harris continued to be San Francisco DA for a while, and she was involved in numerous, much more involved, it seems, in a number of other reforms, and then obviously became Attorney General after that. And you guys have been fighting her in court over these things for a while. The next one was the gun storage ban. This one has gotten into the news recently because there was a clip of her from a press conference where she was promoting this measure, where she just discussed the idea that law enforcement would enter people's lawful gun owners' homes, locked homes, to inspect their gun storage setups, because she didn't want guns to go. This is a very consistent message from her at the time, if you listen to her press conferences, but she had this point of view that lawful gun owners are also a source of crime guns because they don't secure their guns properly, or maybe they're even selling their guns improperly to criminals. But so the next thing that you guys fought with her over, I believe, was this safe storage measure. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, that would have basically made it impossible to access your firearm for self-defense, particularly, in the middle of the night. When the windows are breaking, you would have had to unlock something to get to your firearm. And the crux of this for her was that she was going to enforce this by doing compliance inspections. That's what the gist of her press conference was. Fourth Amendment be damned.
That was an interesting statement by her too. Because do you recall police ever actually doing something like that after they passed this ordinance?
No, and some of the things that she said, consistent with the way she handles a lot of questions now. I mean, she says stuff that there's nothing behind it, and I don't think any police entity ever took it seriously that they could go into somebody's house and inspect for compliance with a locked storage ordinance. Although if they were in the house for some other reason, like a domestic violence call or a fire, something like that, then they could, ask about it. But generally, it wasn't something that they were going to set up a big program to enforce.
Right. Do you recall how that case ended up I think that law was never struck down?
Well, the state court upheld the locked storage ordinance, but this was again before Heller, which was a challenge to DC's locked storage ordinance, effectively, also a ban on handguns in effect. But so the state court upheld it. Now it's been overruled by Heller, so that you don't have the same kind of requirements there. But San Francisco they just keep adjusting the law and trying to. And that was the one that also banned self-defense ammunition. So, and that's law is still in effect. That's on our bucket list of laws, local ordinances that we definitely want to challenge in California.
And from there, that Newsom was on board with that one. Of course, that was one that he also backed, unlike the total handgun ban. But from there, they went more towards targeting local gun shows at was a thing called the Cow Palace outside of San Francisco. And that's been a source of legal fights, even continuing up to today, right? Can you just talk a little bit about?
Yes, we're still litigating gun show bans. The big question in the San Francisco issue was they didn't own the property. It was a state property, so San Francisco couldn't really regulate how that property was going to be used. So, but then that turned into state laws more recently that banned gun shows on all state property. So those fights are still going on in the courts right now.
What is the status? Because Harris, there's numerous press conferences with her and Newsom from her time as DA in San Francisco, where they were complaining about these gun shows, and they were trying to get the state to stop doing them. And now, that view has taken on more popularity in San Francisco, in California government. But didn't you guys just have a victory a
partial victory? You can still have gun shows and you can still offer guns for sale, but weirdly, the Ninth Circuit ruled that the acceptance of that offer is not protected by the First Amendment. So we're in the Supreme Court now, asking for them to recognize the First and Second Amendment, and I think that's an important point for folks to recognize. San Francisco was just sort of the lead city. They wouldn't issue concealed carry permits. They wanted to pass all these laws. But it's always been part of Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris's plan to basically eradicate the gun culture, do whatever they can. They put the one gun store that was in San Francisco out of business. They want to ban gun shows. They want to make it impossible to open or operate a gun store. They want to make it impossible to go to a range. Or any other kind of activity where gun owners discuss gun politics and gun rights and the social utility of firearms ownership. They want to eradicate the gun culture so that the next generation doesn't recognize what they've lost. And that's all part of all their efforts. That's sort of the subtext of everything they do.
And all right, so moving from when she was DA to when she was Attorney General, I guess there were two major fights that you guys had with her during her tenure, and really even extending into the last couple of years. And one deals with concealed carry restrictions in California pre-Bruin, right before the Supreme Court weighed in on some of these good reason clause type of restrictions that only allowed people who government officials said had a good reason to need a concealed carry license to actually obtain one.
Right, a good cause. Yeah, the good cause requirement that was always abused by.
What was Harris's role in that legal fight over?
Well, once we won, once we started winning, and saying, you can't just say good cause. Basically, what some cities were saying was that good cause means you have to have a proof of some stalker, assigned death threat, in order to establish good cause. And so there were a number of different challenges, to constitutional and legal challenges to that. And it wound up in our Peruta case. And she, at first, wanted hands off, wanted to let the local officials defend it. But ultimately, she got involved because we started winning. And her position was good cause is a very high standard, and almost no one should get a license to carry a firearm in public. And that was her DOJ got very involved in that, trying to save that case. And ultimately, in the Peruta case, we won in the 3-judge panel, but then it was overturned. And we asked the Supreme Court to review that case, and they turned it down. So we were stuck with that. But interestingly enough, even though we didn't win legally, we won the persuasive battle because a lot of conservative local sheriffs or police chiefs read that opinion and agreed with it. And so that kind of turned the page before Heller or before Bruin on CCW issuance in a lot of the red counties in California, which is most of them, by the way, other than the coastal strip.
Sure.
So that resulted in a lot more licenses to carry being issued in California.
And then ultimately, the Supreme Court obviously disagreed with Harris's position on concealed carry licensing,
right?
In Bruin itself, right?
And California's position that good cause could be you could require some kind of a special need. You could treat licensed carry as a privilege rather than a right, and that's what Bruin was all about. And that's changed the game in California completely. But Harris is long gone from that fight now, at least in California.
Sure. And but the next one she was involved with, kind of even more directly, even than just defending the state's laws, was the micro-stamping requirement in the safe handgun roster.
In order for that to go into effect, it had to be certified by the Attorney General that there were alternate technologies, so it wasn't a monopoly on this micro-stamping technology process, which, by the way, is impossible.
Because this law didn't pass when Harris was AG. This passed years before she became AG, right?
Yes, it passed before she became AG, and her predecessor, AG, declined to certify that this technology was not a monopoly. But she, shortly after she got into office, certified it so that the law went into effect. And unless you had micro-stamping technology, which means it etches the cartridge from the firing pin and from the chamber where the cartridge expands and goes up against the wall of the chamber. There has to be a little serial number there that would be left on the cartridge. And so unless a handgun had that micro-stamping technology built in, it couldn't be sold in the state of California. It was not on the approved roster of handguns that could be offered for sale in California. And that resulted in basically no guns. Smith & Wesson and Ruger came out and said, we can't do this. It's impossible. It doesn't work. We're not doing it. And that resulted in a very, very limited, the number of handguns that have been available for sale in California has been very limited for since then. And that litigation is another lawsuit that's ongoing that CRPA is very involved with.
But there aren't any manufacturers who make a gun with the micro-stamping technology, right? Not in the U.S., not in Europe, not in Asia,
not that I'm aware of. I mean, there's emerging smart gun technology, whatever that means. But
that's different.
Yeah, that's different, totally different. So, yeah. And there was multiple lawsuits challenging the microstamping. They found that it was impossible, basically. Effectively, the courts found, it's impossible, but that doesn't mean it's unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. So
the effect of this, by the way, what you're describing here is like the guns that were they sort of a grandfathered list. If your gun was already on the roster before that microstamping technology requirement was enacted, it would still be on the roster, but nothing new could be added. Essentially,
unless it had
that. And since nothing
the certification of microstamping is what triggered or what basically stopped manufacturers from being able to add new guns to that list. But they also have to have a loaded chamber indicator and a magazine disconnect lock. All these other things.
There were other requirements, but this one is the one that kept all the essentially banned modern handguns for sale in the state of California for about 10 years, right? This was not a small thing.
No, and it's the roster is still limited. We're still fighting that case.
But you did win on the microstamping point, right?
Well, we won on everything in front of the district court, the trial court, and then the state basically conceded and didn't appeal the microstamping issue. Right. So they repealed the current microstamping law, and then they passed another one, which we're going to have to fight next year when it goes into effect.
Right, I guess so it's a good thing to explain that because it's a little bit complicated, right? You won at the court level, then they appealed, but when they appealed, they didn't appeal the microstamping conclusions. And so they
gave up on that.
Gave up on it, yeah.
And so now you don't have to have microstamping, but you still have to have a loaded chamber indicator and a magazine disconnect, which most handguns.
And you're still fighting that.
Yeah, still fighting that.
Right. Yeah, because most states don't require anything like that, and most handguns don't come standard with those.
And most people don't want them, including law enforcement. They're failure prone.
Okay, so that is. Anything else? Obviously, she became senator after she was attorney general. I don't know that much happened during her tenure as senator on gun policy. But is there anything else?
She's always advocated for a ban on assault weapons, however those are defined. That's that's the thing that she will publicly advocate most vocally.
Yes, she still supports the assault weapons ban, at least on sales. But during your time in these legal fights with Kamala Harris, is there anything else that stands out to you that you recall besides the stuff we've already gone over?
We're looking into this now. I'm going back through my files from back in that time period to try and pull all the local efforts that San Francisco made and anything that she said about those local efforts, because Prop H was the crown jewel of the gun ban lobbyist dream, but that wasn't the only thing that San Francisco was pushing. So we're trying to find some more on what she did so that we can really show the world, what her philosophy is on gun ownership. They all hide behind this, I respect the Second Amendment. That's very easy to say when you think the Second Amendment means you can have one gun with one bullet in your house locked up, and that doesn't protect anything beyond that. Then you can say, I respect the Second Amendment, because in her mind, she's thinking the Second Amendment doesn't do anything. So that's the rhetorical game they play. But she's like I said, she never met a gun control law she didn't like.
Because obviously some of her supporters, I've seen some reaction to the story published where, they're saying, this was 20 years ago. She now says, and has repeated this line a number of times, right? She owns a gun, and in fact, a handgun, and that she doesn't want to take anyone's guns. Her position has changed now. As somebody who has experience fighting in court with her over gun issues, like, do you take anything from that?
I take that she's full of crap. I mean,
so she'll say whatever.
No, of course not. She's a political chameleon. She'll say whatever she needs to say to get elected, and she doesn't want to alienate America's heartland and all the people who who want to be able to choose to own a gun for sport or self-defense or defend their families. She don't want to alienate them, so she'll say what she has to say to placate them. But that's all it is. That's not her true values or her true belief. You know, you don't just all of a sudden see the light because you run for office. Her mindset has always been extreme progressive values, including, but not limited to, gun control.
Okay. So that's why you think this sort of background information of her record matters in this election. Like
unless you're foolish enough to believe that she's seen the light as opposed to felt the heat, you know, of trying to win an election, then this all matters because it tells you where she's truly coming from.
Okay. So it's not, you know, you look at it and you say, this is not old news. This should remain relevant. People should know this.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. I mean, come on, a complete ban on civilian handgun ownership, as we've discussed, was very, very extreme, even for liberals at the time. And she's backing that. I mean, she had to go kind of off the liberal reservation to go that far. And she was willing to. And you couple that with all the other efforts that she's made as either DA or Attorney General or Senator. She's clearly about as anti-gun owner as you get, as a politician can get. Okay.
All right. Well, hey, look, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and give us your experience in California and some of these legal fights that you had with Kamala Harris over the years and your perspective on them. We really appreciate it. For people who want to learn more about CRPA or the other work you do, where can they do that?
Visit us, subscribe at crpa.org. Even if you don't join, please do join. But even if you don't join, subscribe to get the updates on everything that's going on in California. And even if you're not in California, for that matter, because California is sort of the moldy petri dish of bad gun control ideas that they export across the country. So some of the stuff that California is working on is coming soon to a city or state near you. And so being informed can help you help the cause, help everybody defend our Second Amendment rights. So go there. And then Second Amendment Law Center is 2alc.org, which is the group that's now coordinating amicus briefs all across the country that is worthy of support.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We are going to hear a little bit more about our sponsor this week, which is the Dispatch. So I'm going to hand it off to myself now. This week, we're doing another ad swap with the Dispatch. We have a free 30-day trial over at the Dispatch for any Reload reader who wants to give them a try. And I think it makes a lot of sense because we tend to focus on the same things. Of course, the Dispatch has, in addition to reporting, a lot of opinion and analysis from big name folks you probably heard of, Steve Hayes, Jonah Goldberg, Alla Pundit. And there's a lot of guys over there that have been major players in the center-right conservative media space for a long time and who I enjoy reading quite a bit. But in addition to their opinion and editorial work, they have a distinct focus on facts-first reporting, on hard news in the same way that we do here at The Reload. And I think that if you like the reporting we do, if you like our approach, you will probably enjoy the Dispatch and their approach. And they're an even bigger publication than we are, with more resources, with a wider view, of course, of politics. They go into a lot more areas than we do. And so I think they're just a really good resource, and you should check them out. Sign up for that 30-day free trial. Give it a try. I've been a paying member since they were founded, and I highly recommend them. So head over to the Dispatch today to check out what they have to offer. We have a link, of course, in the description and on our website to the 30-day free trial. So give it a try. See what you like.